Good evening. You are watching NBC. I'm Basil Qasim, and these are the headlines. A Palestinian and the 3 Israeli officers killed in shooting attack at settlement near Jerusalem. President Abbas says Palestine is going to again seek full UN membership. Government to hold next week's cabinet meeting in Gaza. And Israeli forces detain 14-year-old girl in Jerusalem. Hello again. On Sunday morning, Israeli occupation forces arrested journalist Raghid Tobsiye, 26, from An-Najah neighborhood west of Qalqilia after breaking into his family's house and damaging its contents. Raghid is a news anchor for An-Najah TV. It is worth mentioning that about 2 months ago, Raghid was arrested while returning from a trip to Qatar after taking part in a journalism course and confiscated $900 without giving reasons. He reportedly filed a legal complaint against the Israeli army. 3 Israelis believed to be security personnel were killed and a 4th seriously injured on Tuesday when a Palestinian opened fire at them from a close range outside an illegal Israeli settlement northwest of occupied Jerusalem. The Palestinian was also shot dead. An Israeli police spokesperson said a Palestinian identified as a 37-year-old resident of the village of Beit Suruk was among Palestinian workers seeking to enter the settlement of Har Adar, built on land expropriated from Palestinian villages to the northwest of Jerusalem for work, when he raised suspicion of police at the checkpoint leading to the settlement. Meanwhile, Israeli forces Tuesday sealed off the entrances to the village of Beit Surik, northwest of Jerusalem, and imposed a curfew on the village as soldiers raided the home of a Palestinian who earlier shot dead 3 Israelis at the entrance of a nearby Israeli settlement, according to a local official. Member of the PLO, Hanan Ashrawi, on Thursday described in a press statement President Mahmoud Abbas' speech at the UN General Assembly's 72nd session as a genuine and candid. In his address before the UN General Assembly yesterday, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas delivered a candid and comprehensive speech in which he addressed the world as well as the Palestinian people, whom he honored for their courage, determination and resilience. Ashrawi said in a press statement. She added that Abbas spoke with an open heart and mind and affirmed the international community's legal, political, moral and humanitarian obligation to end this occupation and enable the Palestinian people to live in freedom and prosperity in the independent state of Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital on the June 4th, 1967 borders.
Dr. Ashrawi spotted the difference in speeches of Mr. Abbas, Trump and Netanyahu, which is USA President Donald Trump totally dropped any mention of peace in the Middle East, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech was one of arrogance, exceptionalism and ideology, she remarked. Both attempted to shape the global agenda by a sin of omission, by dropping any mention of the occupation and the requirements of peace, she added. On the other hand, President Abbas made a genuine plea for a just peace and emphasized the imperative of supporting the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people and their legitimate aspirations for freedom and self-determination. He clearly laid out the foundations for peace and stability based on international law and conventions and highlighted the consequences of not achieving a two-state solution. He also reiterated his unequivocal support for peaceful popular resistance against the Israeli colonial occupation. Clearly, we are facing a critical moment when it comes to the future of Palestinian sovereignty and statehood. As President Mahmoud Abbas stressed, if the two-state solution were to be destroyed due to the creation of one-state reality with two-system apartheid from the unchecked imposition of this occupation that is rejected by our people and the world, this would be a failure, and neither you nor we will have any other choice but to continue the struggle and demand full, equal rights for all inhabitants of historic Palestine. If members of the international community are serious about standing on the right side of justice, we call on them to recognize Palestine in the immediate future. As President Abbas said, we ask all states that recognize Israel to define its borders, since recognition requires the delineation of boundaries. The State of Palestine has accepted the 1967 borders as a major historical compromise and as a substantive contribution to peace. It is our hope that leaders around the world will heed President Abbas's call and exhibit the will and moral courage required to hold Israel to account, work to end the occupation within a specific and binding time frame, and to ensure the establishment of viable, sovereign Palestinian state. Ayman Maani, NBC.
President Mahmoud Abbas told a meeting for the Palestinian leadership held in Ramallah on Monday night that a draft resolution is going to be submitted to the United Nations Security Council seeking full UN membership on intra-Palestinian reconciliation following Hamas' agreement to dissolve its administrative committee that ran Gaza affairs. President Abbas said the Palestinian government is going to Gaza soon to see what it can do as a government in charge of all affairs, and then it will be clear how things will develop. President Mahmoud Abbas congratulated German Chancellor Angela Merkel on her party's victory in the German national elections. He wished Merkel success in forming the next government, which he said will bring progress and prosperity to the brotherly people of Germany. President Abbas said he looks forward to strengthening cooperation and coordination between the two countries to serve the people in the best way possible, as well as supporting sincere Palestinian efforts to achieve a just peace sought after by all the people in our region. The Palestinian government is expected to hold its cabinet meeting next week in Gaza in a sign indicating improvement in relations between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, which rules Gaza since its 2007 coup. Government spokesman Yusuf al-Mahmoud said Prime Minister Ram al-Hamdallah decided after consulting with President Mahmoud Abbas to hold the weekly cabinet meeting in Gaza next week. Hamas announced 2 weeks ago dissolving its appointed administrative committee, paving the way for reconciliation efforts to succeed. Mahmoud said the Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers will arrive in the Gaza Strip next Monday to assume their duties after Hamas has agreed to dissolve the Administrative Committee as demanded by President Abbas to proceed with reconciliation efforts. The Cabinet meeting is expected to be held the next day. Members of the European Parliament's delegation for relations with Palestine on Friday urged the European Union to suspend association agreements with Israel due to Israel's persistent violations of international law. In a statement released on Friday, they urged the EU to suspend the EU-Israel Association Agreement due to Israel's persistent violations of international law. The two-state solution will only be achieved when Israel starts feeling the consequences for their illegal actions. Israel's continued settlement expansion has meant for Palestinian communities the loss of their homes and denial of access to their lands and livelihoods, maintained the statement. A crew from the Israeli municipality of West Jerusalem Monday distributed demolition notices against a number of Palestinian homes in the town of Isawiyah, an Arab neighborhood in Jerusalem, citing unpermitted construction as a pretext. Member of the follow-up committee in Isawiyah, Raed Abu Rayale, said staff from the Israeli municipality, backed by Israeli forces, conducted provocative tours throughout the said town, photographed its streets and the residential and commercial structures, and left notices for the demolition of a number of homes in the town.
Israel's Jerusalem municipality distributed demolition notices for several Palestinian homes in the occupied East Jerusalem neighborhood of Isawiyah on Monday for allegedly building homes without Israeli-issued building permits. According to Israeli news agency Wafa, Raed Abu Rayale, a member of the village's follow-up committee, said that Israeli forces and municipality officials had conducted provocative tours in Isawiyah. He added that Israeli forces had photographed streets and Palestinian-owned residential and commercial structures, while handing demolition notices to several homes in the neighborhood. A spokesperson for Jerusalem municipality was not immediately available to comment. Israel rarely grants Palestinian permits to build in East Jerusalem, though the Jerusalem municipality has claimed that compared to the Jewish population, they receive a disproportionately low number of permit applications from Palestinian communities, which also see high approval ratings. For Jewish Israelis in occupied East Jerusalem illegal settlements, The planning, marketing, development, and infrastructure are funded and executed by Israeli government. By contrast, in Palestinian neighborhoods, all the burden falls on individual families to contend with a lengthy permit application that can last several years and cost tens of thousands of dollars.
According to witnesses, Israeli occupation forces on Monday raided a women students' dormitory in the city of Tulkarem in the northern West Bank. They said Israeli army patrols raided Hasib Sabbagh building, which is used as a dormitory for female students and run by Khaduri Technical University located in the western part of the city. The witnesses said that a number of Israeli jeeps closed the street of Khaduri University as soldiers searched and ransacked the students' apartments. Clashes broke out between Israeli forces and Palestinian youths in the area that resulted in soldiers firing tear gas at the students, causing several suffocation cases among them, some requiring hospitalization. Nearby schools were also affected by the tear gas, with young students reportedly suffering from tear gas inhalation. Israeli occupation forces detained on Monday a 14-year-old Palestinian girl from An-Najah, northeast of Jerusalem, on suspicion of intention to carry out an attack, according to Wadi Hilwe Information Center. It said members of the Israeli Security Service have also raided homes in the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Silwan and detained two brothers, 20 and 18 years old, and the third resident. It did not give reasons for the detentions. Israeli forces on Monday shot down a bookstore in the Heshe refugee camp in Bethlehem, south of the occupied West Bank, during a raid of the camp, according to Palestinian security sources. No reason was given for closing the bookstore, which is effective for 3 weeks. Sources said the order to close the bookstore came after an army force raided the camp and broke into some homes. Israeli settlers torched on Sunday olive trees near the village of Kufr Khalil to the south of Nablus city in the West Bank, according to local sources. Ghassan Douglas, who monitors settlement activities in the area, said that Israeli settlers from illegal Barakha settlement nearby torched olive trees in the area. The trees belong to residents of Kufr Khalil. Settlers' violence against Palestinians and their property is routine in the West Bank and is rarely prosecuted by Israeli authorities. And now we move to Amjad Al-Isa with his academic news right from An-Najah University.
Thank you, Basil. Student Manar Mislih from the MSc Physics program at An-Najah National University has recently completed the Syrian Summer School in Geneva, Switzerland. The scholarship was over 2 months and was within the frame of strengthening academic relations between Syrian and the worldwide universities and the Palestinian universities. Student Mislih participated in a research group and attended a number of lectures and workshops on different physics topics. Dr. Ahmed Basalat, staff member at the physics department, said student Mislih is not only an MSc physics student, she is also a physics teacher at one of Salfi's schools. The scholarship allows us to introduce the school students to Syrian's activities, training programs, and scientific experiments. It is worth mentioning that An-Najah is one of the Arab universities that has connection with Atlas experiment in Syrian. Dr. Ithar Bishtawi, head of optometry department at An-Najah, has recently published a book titled The Effect of Multifocal Contact Lenses by Scholars Press, a copyright to Omniscriptum in Germany. The book sheds light on bifocal and multifocal contact lenses that correct central myopia and the surrounding areas. The book aims to control the progression of myopia as ordinary ways of correcting central myopia. It is worth mentioning that Dr. Bishtawi submitted her book as an MSc thesis at the University of Manchester in the UK. On Wednesday, September the 20th, the Office of International Development and External Affairs at An-Najah organized an orientation session for the Arabic for Non-Native Speakers Institute students at the library's conference room in the old campus. The session offered the students enrolling in the Arabic for Non-Native Speakers Institute information about the West Bank, life in Nablus, and the Najah National University. The International Office discussed a number of issues about Nablus and its history, as well as other topics that will help students in their study and enjoy their time in Palestine, such as the Zajil tours and the voluntary work at different parts of Nablus. The International Office also gave a presentation on An-Najah's history, students and campuses, the culture in Nablus, transportation and accommodation, visa issues, and spending holidays. The American Corner, in cooperation with the English department at An-Najah, organized a symposium on the poetics and politics of displacement. The symposium was attended by experts in the American literature, as well as many English professors and students from local and international universities such as Birzeit, Hebron, and Bethlehem. NBC Journal team was there and prepared the following report.
We in the American Studies program at An-Najah University, in coordination with the American Corner in Nablus, decided to co-organize this 2017 American Studies Symposium which seeks to address various literary representations. It carries the title Beyond Home, Poetics and Politics of Displacement. We have a large audience from universities across the West Bank, and we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Karen Kaplan, who's from California University at Davis, and she's a key figure in displacement studies.
And back to you, Basil.
Thank you, Amjad. And now it's Lena and her corner.
Thank you, Basil. King Salman ordered the reform in a royal decree delivered on Tuesday night, requesting that driver's licenses be issued to women who wanted them. Women in Saudi Arabia have been granted the right to drive, overturning a cornerstone of Saudi conservatism that had been a cause célèbre for activists demanding reforms in the fundamentalist kingdom. Following the decree, women will no longer need permission from a legal guardian to get a license and will not need a guardian in the car when they drive, said the new Saudi ambassador to Washington, D.C., Prince Khalid bin Salman bin Abdulaziz. Nearly 3 out of 4 children experience violence each year, according to a global study that warns practices such as corporal punishment are widespread in both rich and poor countries. Around 1.7 billion children experience some form of abuse over the course of a year, according to the report by the Global Initiative, which measured the prevalence of interpersonal violence such as fighting at school, bullying, or sexual abuse. The biggest cause of such violence was corporal punishment at home, which affected 58% of children in industrialized countries and more than 8 in 10 children across the Eastern and Southern Africa, South Asia, and Western and Central Africa. An ancient city thought to have been founded in the era of Alexander the Great has been discovered after being lost in the sands of history for over 2,000 years. Kalat Gadarban, which overlooks a river in the Sulaimaniya province of Iraqi Kurdistan, bears the traces of an ancient fortified settlement, and now archaeologists have finally stepped foot in this long-hidden area. An enormous Antarctic glacier has given up an iceberg over 100 square miles in size. The second time in 2 years, it has lost such a large piece in a process that has scientists wondering if its behavior is changing for the worse. The Pine Island Glacier is one of the largest in West Antarctica, a region that is currently Antarctica's big ice loser. Pine Island, which loses an extraordinary 45 billion tons of ice to the ocean each year, is 25 miles wide, where its floating front touches the sea and rests on the seafloor in waters over half a mile deep. NASA is dead set on sending astronauts to Mars within the next 15 to 20 years. China has said it hopes to send people there between 2020 and 2030. And even Russia is flouting plans to put boots on the red planet. Meanwhile, spacecraft funder Elon Musk is trying to cut the cost of spaceflight enough to start establishing a permanent Martian colony of 1 million people as soon as possible. But if a study of radiation exposure in mice has any bearing on humans, going to Mars may be much more dangerous than anyone expected. The root problem is cosmic rays, as detailed in a Nature study and highlighted by a recent Business Insider video. Researchers have identified a new link between Alzheimer's and a protein called Tau that could help treat the disease in the future. The research centers on a variation of a gene called ApoE4, which increases the risk of Alzheimer's by up to 12 times, but scientists still aren't sure exactly how it increases that risk. For the first time, new research into solar winds and the space hurricanes they create explains in details how these bursts push plasma towards Earth, and how we might better protect the satellites and other technology we all rely on for modern living. We are usually protected from the rays of charged particles pushed out of the sun thanks to Earth's magnetosphere or magnetic field boundary. But these shoots of energy can create huge vortex along the edge, pushing plasma into our magnetic shield. And back to you, Basil.
Thank you, Lina, and thank you, dear viewers, for watching. Goodbye.